Nights in the Sornel house were supposed to be quiet, peaceful, the kind of suburban tranquility that comes with a mortgage payment and matching bedroom sets. But insomnia has a way of revealing truths that daylight keeps hidden, and tonight, as I lay staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation, I discovered that my perfect little world was built on lies. My name is Wilder Sornel, and I've been a construction foreman for 22 years. I know how to read blueprints, spot structural weaknesses, and recognize when something's about to collapse. What I apparently couldn't recognize was when my own marriage was crumbling beneath my feet. The digital clock glowed 2:47 a.m. when I heard the guest room door creak open. Mira thought I was asleep. Hell, I should have been asleep. But the quarterly budget reports had my mind spinning like a cement mixer. Through our cracked bedroom door, I watched my wife of 8 years tiptoe down the hallway wearing nothing but an oversized hoodie. Blake's old high school hoodie, to be precise. The one with Sornel 24 printed across the back. Blake is my son from my first marriage. 24 years old, 6'2", and blessed with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to work for anything. He'd been staying in our guest room for the past 3 months while his apartment underwent renovations, a story that was starting to smell fishier than week-old salmon. I waited 10 minutes before slipping out of bed. The hardwood floors knew exactly where to step to avoid creaking, a skill learned from years of early morning construction starts. The guest room door was closed, but I could hear muffled voices through the thin walls. Mira's laugh, Blake's deeper chuckle. The kind of intimate conversation that married couples have at 3 a.m., except I wasn't part of it. My stomach twisted into knots that would make a sailor jealous. Instead of barging in like some crazed husband from a daytime soap opera, I retreated to the kitchen. Years of managing construction crews had taught me the value of gathering evidence before making accusations. You don't tear down a wall without checking for load-bearing beams first. The home laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, still logged into Mira's accounts. She'd been working late on HR reports, or so she claimed. The screen showed her personal email, and there at the top of the inbox was a message thread labeled B-Dog, Blake's ridiculous nickname since college. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Opening someone else's private messages felt wrong, but so did sneaking around in my son's hoodie at 3 a.m. I clicked. The messages started innocent enough. Thanks for letting me crash here, and hope I'm not imposing too much. But as I scrolled down, the tone shifted. Compliments about how amazing Mira looked. Inside jokes about old Wilder and his boring construction stories. Plans to meet up when I was working late. Increasingly intimate details about shared moments. The final message, sent just 2 hours ago, made my hands shake. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. W is snoring already. I wasn't snoring. I was lying awake, worried about payroll and material costs, while my wife planned her next rendezvous with my son. 22 years of construction work teaches you to stay calm under pressure. When a crane operator makes a mistake or a foundation starts shifting, panic gets people hurt. So I did what I do best. I made a plan. First, I opened a new folder on the desktop labeled Estate Updates, boring enough that Mira wouldn't think twice about it. Then, I systematically copied every message in the B-Dog thread, organizing them by date and time. The laptop's browser history revealed frequent visits to a private messaging app I'd never heard of. More evidence to collect. Next, I accessed our home security system. The doorbell camera and motion sensors kept detailed logs of everyone who entered and left the house. Blake's late-night arrivals painted a clear pattern: Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday nights for the past 6 weeks. Always after 11 p.m., always when I had early morning job sites. Mira's calendar app provided the final piece of the puzzle. Appointments marked only with initials: BS 11:30 p.m. and meeting BS. The timestamps matched perfectly with Blake's camera appearances and their message exchanges. I exported everything into a single folder, added timestamps, and created an index document that laid out the evidence like a construction timeline. If you're going to tear down a marriage, you better have your documentation in order. By 4:30 a.m., I had enough evidence to convince any reasonable person that my wife and son were having an affair. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent more time organizing their betrayal than they'd probably spent planning it. The guest room door opened again, and I quickly minimized the laptop screen. Mira emerged wearing her own robe now, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed. She padded to the kitchen for a glass of water, stopping short when she saw me sitting at the counter. "Wilder? What are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my voice level. "Quarterly reports are due Monday. You know how it is." She nodded, but her eyes darted to the laptop screen showing her email inbox. "Working late again? You should get some rest." "Actually, I need to borrow the laptop tomorrow. Want to print some concert tickets for next weekend. That blues festival you mentioned." Her face went pale. "Oh, I need it for work stuff. Maybe use your phone instead?" "Phone's too small for printing. I'll just grab it in the morning before you're up. No big deal." Mira forced a smile that looked like it physically hurt. "Sure, of course. Whatever you need." She kissed my forehead, the kind of guilty kiss that wives give when they're overcompensating, and headed back to our bedroom. I waited until I heard the door close before opening the laptop again. The B-Dog message thread was gone, deleted. But Mira had forgotten about browser history, cached files, and the beautiful fact that nothing ever truly disappears from a computer, especially when you know where to look. I spent the next hour recovering the deleted messages and cross-referencing them with the evidence I'd already collected. By sunrise, I had a complete timeline of their affair, including messages about how clueless I was and how easy it would be to handle me if I ever found out. They thought I was just some dumb construction worker who couldn't see past the end of his measuring tape. They were about to learn that underestimating Wilder Sornel was the biggest mistake of their lives. Sunday was 5 days away, plenty of time to set the stage for a family meeting they'd never forget. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes New England famous. Mira was already gone, some emergency HR meeting that couldn't wait, according to the note she'd left on the refrigerator. Blake had vanished too, probably to the gym where he spent most of his time sculpting muscles and his ego in equal measure. I had the house to myself and 5 hours before anyone returned. Time to build my case like I'd build a foundation, solid, level, and strong enough to support whatever came next. My first stop was Zeke's Tavern on Main Street. Ezekiel Morrison had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both stupid enough to think we'd play professional baseball. Now he owned the town's most popular watering hole and served as unofficial therapist to half the population. If anyone would know how to handle this situation, it would be Zeke. The tavern was nearly empty at 10 a.m., just a few regulars nursing coffee and hangovers. Zeke looked up from wiping down glasses, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Wilder Sornel, as I live and breathe. What brings you to my establishment at this ungodly hour? Don't tell me you're developing a drinking problem." "Wish it were that simple," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Got a situation that requires your particular brand of wisdom." Zeke poured me a coffee without asking. 25 years of friendship meant he knew I took it black with 1 sugar. "Lay it on me, brother. Can't be worse than the time you thought you were going to marry that redhead from Boston. Remember when you caught your ex-wife with that insurance salesman?" His smile faded. "That was 15 years ago, Wilder. Why are we taking a trip down that particular memory lane?" "Because I need to know how you handled it. The discovery part, I mean. Before you did anything stupid." Zeke set down his towel and leaned against the bar. "Who is it?" "Mira." "And?" I took a sip of coffee, buying time I didn't need. The words felt like broken glass in my throat. "Blake." For 10 seconds, the only sound in the tavern was the hum of the beer coolers. Zeke's face went through several expressions: surprise, disgust, anger, before settling on grim determination. Your son Blake? Your actual son? Stepson, technically. But yeah, found their messages, have camera footage, calendar appointments, the whole 9 yards. Jesus Christ on a bicycle. Zeke poured himself a whiskey, despite the early hour. How long? At least 6 weeks. Probably longer. And you haven't confronted them? That's why I'm here. You went straight at your ex-wife, remember? Screaming match in the driveway, neighbors calling the cops, lawyers getting involved. How'd that work out for you? Zeke grimaced. Point taken. She took half my money and all my dignity. So what's your plan? I pulled out my phone and showed him the evidence folder I'd compiled. Screenshots, timestamps, cross-referenced data that painted a picture clearer than high-definition television. Zeke whistled low as he scrolled through the files. You've been busy. This is more organized than most police investigations. 22 years in construction teaches you to document everything. Can't build a house without blueprints. So, what's the blueprint for this situation? I outlined my plan. Sunday family meeting, full disclosure, public consequences. No violence, no illegal activity, just the truth served up with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. Zeke nodded approvingly. Remind me never to cross you, Wilder. This is diabolical in the best possible way. They want to play games? Fine, but they're playing in my house by my rules, with my equipment. What do you need from me? Moral support, and maybe some advice on how to handle Blake. He's going to be angry when this goes public. Blake's been coasting on Daddy's goodwill his entire life. Time he learned there are consequences for his actions. Zeke refilled my coffee. You know what the worst part is? It's not even original. Stepmother and stepson? It's like they got their ideas from daytime television. Original or not, it's going to end Sunday. I spent another hour at Zeke's, fine-tuning the plan and working through potential complications. By the time I left, I felt like a general preparing for battle, nervous but confident in the strategy. My next stop was the hardware store, not for tools this time, but for printing supplies. The family meeting would require visual aids, and I wanted everything perfect. High-quality paper, color printing, professional presentation folders. If you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well do it with style. The young clerk behind the counter recognized me from various construction projects around town. Big presentation coming up, Mr. Sornel? You could say that. Biggest one of my career. Back home, I set up a makeshift war room in my workshop. The evidence folder got printed in triplicate, with individual packets for each family member. Timeline charts, message transcripts, camera footage stills, everything organized with the precision of architectural drawings. My phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Staying at friend's place tonight, back tomorrow for family thing. Perfect. One less variable to worry about. Mira returned around 3 p.m., looking frazzled and guilty. She found me in the workshop, surrounded by papers and manila folders. What's all this? Looks like you're planning a corporate takeover. Just getting ready for tomorrow's meeting. Estate planning stuff, like I mentioned. Want to make sure everyone understands the family finances. She picked up one of the folders, but I casually moved it out of reach. Nothing too exciting. Trust documents, insurance policies, boring legal stuff. You know how Blake gets when we talk about money. Figured visual aids might help. Right, of course. Mira's voice carried a nervous edge. I should probably review the materials beforehand. Make sure I understand everything. No need. I've got it all handled. Besides, you've been working so hard lately with all those late meetings and emergency calls. Let me take care of this one. The guilt that flashed across her face was almost satisfying. Almost. But I'd save the real satisfaction for tomorrow. That evening, we went through the motions of a normal Saturday night. Take out Chinese food, mindless television, small talk about work and weather. Mira kept glancing at her phone, probably wondering why Blake wasn't responding to her messages. He was maintaining radio silence on my advice. Zeke had volunteered to keep him busy with an impromptu guys' night out. Around 10 p.m., Mira announced she was going to bed early. Big day tomorrow with the family meeting and all. Sweet dreams, I said, not looking up from the baseball game on TV. She lingered in the doorway like she wanted to say something else, but eventually disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close before returning to my workshop. The final piece of the puzzle was the group email I'd composed for Monday morning. Mira's HR department, our extended family, close friends, everyone who mattered would receive a copy of tomorrow's presentation. The subject line was already written. Important family update. Please review immediately. By midnight, everything was ready. Folders organized, laptop presentation loaded, email scheduled for automatic delivery. The family meeting was set for 2 p.m. Sunday, giving everyone time to arrive and get comfortable before their world exploded. I poured myself a whiskey, Zeke's influence, and sat in my workshop surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal. 22 years of construction had taught me that some structures can't be repaired. Sometimes you have to tear them down completely and start fresh. Tomorrow, the Sornel family would learn that lesson the hard way. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay in bed and pretend the world doesn't exist. Unfortunately for Mira and Blake, hiding wasn't an option today. I was up at 6 a.m., reviewing my presentation one final time. Every slide was perfect, every piece of evidence cross-referenced and verified. The manila folders sat stacked on my desk like ammunition waiting for battle. Mira appeared in the kitchen around 8, already dressed and made up despite the early hour. She was nervous. I could tell by the way she kept checking her phone and adjusting her hair. "Morning," she said, pouring herself coffee with shaking hands. "Ready for the big family meeting?" "Been ready for weeks," I replied, which was technically true. "Blake, confirm he's coming?" "He'll be here. Probably running late, you know how he is." Actually, I knew exactly where Blake was because I'd been tracking his location through the family phone plan, currently at some 24-hour diner on the other side of town, probably trying to work up the courage to face whatever he thought was coming. The other attendees started arriving around 1:30. My Aunt Lydia came first, carrying a casserole dish and enough gossip to fuel a small newspaper. At 72, she knew everyone in town and remembered every scandal going back to the Carter administration. "Wilder, honey, you look tired," she said, kissing my cheek. "Hope this isn't about your health. We can't afford to lose another good man in this family." "Nothing like that, Aunt Lydia, just some financial planning stuff, boring but necessary." Tessa arrived next. Mira's best friend and enabler, the kind of woman who thinks loyalty means helping friends make terrible decisions. She brought her husband Dave, a quiet accountant who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mira's been so stressed about this meeting," Tessa confided, while Dave examined my bookshelf. "She's worried you're going to announce some kind of major life change." "You could say that," I replied. Blake finally showed up at 1:55, looking like he'd slept in his car. His usual cocky demeanor was nowhere to be found, replaced by the nervous energy of someone who knows they're in trouble but isn't sure how much. "Dad," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Thanks for including me in this. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye on financial stuff." "Family is family, Blake. Everyone deserves to know where they stand." By 2 p.m., we were all gathered in the living room. I'd rearranged the furniture so everyone faced the big screen TV with the laptop connected and ready. The manila folders sat on the coffee table like place settings for a very special dinner. "Before we start," I announced, "I want everyone to know how much I appreciate you being here. Family meetings aren't always fun, but they're important. Today we're going to discuss some changes that affect everyone in this room." Mira and Blake exchanged a quick glance, the kind of look that guilty people share when they think they're about to be exposed. They had no idea how right they were. "I've prepared some materials to help explain the situation," I continued, handing out the folders. "Please don't open them yet. I'd like to present the information in the proper order. Aunt Lydia immediately tried to peek inside her folder, but I gently moved it away. Patience, Aunt Lydia. All will be revealed. I connected my laptop to the TV and opened the first slide. A family photo from last Christmas, all of us smiling and happy. The perfect picture of domestic bliss. This was taken 8 months ago, I said. Look at those faces. Everyone looks so content, so secure in their relationships. Funny how much can change in just a few months. The second slide showed a calendar view of the past 6 weeks, with certain dates highlighted in red. These are what I call significant dates in our family history. Times when important events occurred that affected our household dynamics. Mira's face was getting paler by the minute. Blake looked like he was going to be sick. Now, I know some of you are wondering why we're looking at calendars and old photos. Bear with me. Context is important for understanding the full situation. The third slide displayed a screenshot of our home security system dashboard. Technology is amazing these days. Our doorbell camera keeps detailed records of everyone who enters and leaves the house. Very helpful for tracking family activities. I clicked to the next slide. A compilation of timestamps showing Blake's late-night arrivals, all after 11 p.m., all on nights when I had early morning job sites. As you can see, Blake has been quite the night owl lately, coming and going at all hours. Made me curious about what could be so important that it couldn't wait until normal visiting hours. Blake started to speak, but I held up a hand. Please hold questions until the end. I want to make sure everyone has the complete picture. The next series of slides showed message timestamps from the B-Dog thread, carefully edited to remove explicit content, but clearly showing the frequency and timing of communications between Mira and Blake. Communication is the foundation of any good relationship, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. These charts show communication patterns between certain family members over the past 6 weeks. Notice how the frequency increases on specific days. Aunt Lydia was starting to catch on. Her eyes narrowed as she looked back and forth between Mira and Blake. Tessa looked confused, but Dave was studying the slides with accountant-level attention to detail. Now comes the really interesting part, I said, clicking to a slide that cross-referenced the calendar dates, security footage, and message timestamps. When you overlay all this data, a very clear pattern emerges. The pattern was undeniable. Every late-night visit corresponded with message exchanges. Every emergency meeting on Mira's calendar aligned with Blake's presence in the house. Every lie they'd told was documented and time-stamped. At this point, you're probably wondering what all this means, I said, looking directly at Mira and Blake. So let me be perfectly clear. I clicked to the final slide, a single sentence in 72-point font. My wife has been having an affair with my son. The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Lydia gasped. Tessa's mouth fell open. Dave just stared at the screen like he was reading a particularly interesting financial report. Mira finally found her voice. Wilder, this is... Please don't interrupt, I said calmly. Now you can open your folders. Everything's documented inside. Messages, photos, timestamps, cross-references. Take your time reviewing the materials. Blake jumped to his feet. Dad, let me explain. Sit down, Blake. We're not finished. Something in my tone made him comply. He slumped back into his chair, looking like a deflated balloon. Aunt Lydia was flipping through her folder with the enthusiasm of someone reading a particularly juicy novel. "Oh, my stars," she muttered. "Oh, my stars and garters." Tessa was reading with growing horror, occasionally glancing at Mira with expressions that ranged from shock to disgust. Dave continued his methodical review, occasionally nodding like he was approving an expense report. I want everyone to understand, I continued, that this presentation represents weeks of careful investigation. Every piece of evidence has been verified and cross-referenced. Nothing here is speculation or assumption. Mira was crying now, but they were angry tears, not remorseful ones. You had no right to spy on me. Those were private messages. Private messages sent from my laptop, in my house, using my internet connection. But you're right, they were private, which is why I've decided to make them public. I clicked to open my email program, showing the draft message I'd prepared. The recipient list included Mira's HR department, our extended family, and most of our mutual friends. This email is scheduled to send automatically at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Same information you're reviewing now, just shared with a wider audience. I believe in transparency. Blake was on his feet again. You can't do this. This is blackmail. Actually, it's not. Blackmail involves demanding something in exchange for silence. I'm not demanding anything, and I have no intention of staying silent. This is just good old-fashioned consequences. Mira was frantically scrolling through her phone, probably trying to figure out damage control. Wilder, please. We can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. You're absolutely right, I said, standing up and walking to the coffee table. It didn't have to be like this at all. I picked up the house keys and set them next to the folders. But this is how you chose to handle your marriage, so now I'm choosing how to handle the aftermath. The room erupted in chaos. Mira was shouting about privacy and legal action. Blake was making threats about what he'd do if I ruined his reputation. Tessa was trying to play peacemaker while Dave continued reading like nothing was happening. Only Aunt Lydia seemed to be enjoying herself. Best family meeting we've had in years, she announced. Finally, some honest communication. I walked to the front door and grabbed my overnight bag, packed and ready since yesterday. The house is yours until the divorce is finalized. After that, we'll let the lawyers sort out the details. Where are you going? Mira demanded. Zeke's place. He's got a spare room and better company. As I reached for the door handle, Blake blocked my path. We're not done talking about this. I looked at my son, my disappointing, entitled, morally bankrupt son, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart. That had been broken for days. This was something deeper. The last connection between who I used to be and who I was becoming. Yes, we are, I said quietly. We're done talking about everything. I pushed past him and walked out into the gray afternoon, leaving behind 22 years of marriage, 24 years of fatherhood, and every illusion I'd ever held about the people I'd trusted most. Behind me, I could hear Aunt Lydia's voice carrying through the open door. Well, I never. Wait until the church ladies hear about this. The email would send automatically in 18 hours. By Tuesday morning, everyone in town would know exactly what kind of people Mira and Blake really were. Justice, I'd learned, doesn't always come from courtrooms and legal proceedings. Sometimes it comes from a construction worker with a laptop and an unshakable belief that actions should have consequences. Monday morning at Zeke's place started with coffee strong enough to wake the deceased and a phone that hadn't stopped ringing since 8:01 a.m. The automatic email had deployed like clockwork, and the fallout was everything I'd hoped for and more. Wilder, you magnificent bastard, Zeke said, scrolling through his own phone. Half the town is calling me asking if the story is true. The other half already knows it's true and wants more details. I was surprisingly calm, considering I'd just nuked my entire life from orbit. What are they saying? Mostly shock and disgust. Aunt Lydia's been working the phone tree since dawn. She's calling it the scandal of the century. Tessa's apparently locked herself in her house and won't answer the door. And Mira... He paused, grinning. Mira's having a very bad day at work. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 8 News. We'd like to interview you about the family situation that's been circulating online. Please call when convenient. News cruise, I muttered. Didn't expect that. You underestimated the entertainment value of your revenge, brother. This story has everything. Betrayal, family drama, detailed evidence. It's like a soap opera, but with better documentation. The landline at Zeke's rang for the 15th time that morning. He answered with his usual charm. Zeke's Tavern and Gossip Central, how can I help you? It was my foreman, calling to check if I'd be at the job site today. Word was already spreading through the construction community. Apparently, one of Mira's HR colleagues had a husband who worked for our biggest competitor. Take a few days, my foreman suggested. Let this settle down before you come back. Don't worry about the projects. We've got everything covered. That was the beauty of working in construction. Your personal life might implode, but concrete still needed pouring and walls still needed framing. The work would wait. Around 10 a.m., Zeke's Tavern started filling with the usual Monday crowd, except today everyone had the same topic of conversation. I'd become the most famous person in town, which was both gratifying and exhausting. "Wilder!" called out Mrs. Patterson from the post office. "Honey, I am so sorry about what happened, but I have to say, the way you handled it was just brilliant. My Harold could learn a thing or two about standing up for himself." Similar sentiments came from a steady stream of well-wishers, curiosity seekers, and people who just wanted to be part of the drama. Apparently, I'd become some kind of folk hero for scorned spouses everywhere. The real entertainment started around noon when Tessa showed up at the tavern looking like she'd been through a blender. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her usual confident demeanor replaced by panic. "Wilder, we need to talk," she announced, marching up to my table like she was leading a cavalry charge. "I'm listening," I said, not bothering to stand up. "This has gone too far. Mira's career is ruined. Blake's been kicked out of his apartment. You've destroyed 2 lives over a mistake." "A mistake?" I set down my coffee and gave her my full attention. "Tessa, help me understand something. If I accidentally drove my truck through your living room, would you call that a mistake?" "That's not the same thing." "You're right. It's not. If I drove through your living room, it would be over in 30 seconds. This mistake went on for months. It was planned, coordinated, and executed with the kind of precision that would make a military strategist proud." Tessa pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "Look at this. Mira's boss called her into the office this morning. HR is conducting an investigation into her moral fitness for handling sensitive employee matters. She could lose everything." "Good." "Good? Wilder, she's your wife." "Was my wife, past tense. She stopped being my wife the moment she decided my son was more interesting than her marriage vows." Zeke appeared at our table with a fresh coffee for me and a pointed look for Tessa. "Ma'am, I hope you're not here to cause trouble for my friend. He's been through enough." "I'm trying to fix this situation before it gets worse." "Worse for who?" I asked. "Because from where I sit, things are looking pretty good. The truth is out, the guilty parties are facing consequences, and I'm finally sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks." Tessa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What if we could work out some kind of arrangement? Mira's willing to go to counseling. Blake could move across the country. You could have the house, the business assets, whatever you want. Just stop this public humiliation campaign." "You think this is about money?" "Isn't it always?" I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in days. "Tessa, you know what your problem is. You think everyone operates like you do. You think everything has a price and every problem has a deal that can fix it. Doesn't it? Some things can't be fixed. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, stays broken forever." She was getting desperate now. "What about Blake? He's your son. Don't you care about his future? Blake made his choice. He's a grown man who decided to pursue a relationship with his father's wife. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. He's 24. He made a stupid mistake." "I've been 24, Tessa. I knew the difference between right and wrong at 24. Hell, I knew it at 14. Tessa's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and winced. It's Mira. She's probably calling from the parking lot after her meeting with HR. You should take that, I suggested. Sounds like she's going to need all the support she can get. After Tessa left, the tavern settled into a more normal rhythm. The lunch crowd was bigger than usual. Apparently, nothing builds an appetite like a good scandal. But the conversations gradually shifted away from my personal drama to more typical small-town topics. Around 2 p.m., my phone rang with a call from Blake. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to 3 minutes of rambling apologies mixed with threats and pleas for understanding. He sounded like a child who'd been caught stealing cookies and couldn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. The afternoon brought a parade of visitors to the tavern, each with their own take on the situation. The general consensus was that I'd handled things exactly right, though a few people thought I should have confronted Mira and Blake privately before going public. Privacy is overrated, Aunt Lydia announced during her 3 p.m. appearance. These two carried on their shameful behavior right under your nose for months. They forfeited any right to privacy when they decided to make a fool of you in your own home. She'd brought a casserole and enough gossip to fuel the town for weeks. According to her sources, Mira had been seen crying in her car outside the HR building. Blake had been spotted loading boxes into his truck at his apartment complex. Tessa was telling anyone who'd listened that the whole thing was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Misunderstanding? Aunt Lydia snorted. Like misunderstanding the difference between your husband and your stepson. Some people have no shame. As evening approached, I realized I felt better than I had in months. The constant low-level anxiety that had been my companion since discovering the affair was gone, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. I'd identified a problem, gathered evidence, and implemented a solution, just like any other construction project. Zeke closed the tavern early, and we sat at the bar sharing a bottle of whiskey and reflecting on the day's events. Any regrets? He asked. Only that I didn't figure it out sooner. What's next? Divorce lawyer, asset protection, making sure Blake understands he's no longer welcome in my life. Think they'll try to fight back? I considered this while swirling whiskey in my glass. Mira might. She's calculating enough to try some kind of legal maneuver. But Blake? He's too much of a coward. He'll disappear and try to rebuild his reputation somewhere else. And you're okay with losing him permanently? That was the question I'd been avoiding all day. Blake had been part of my life for 24 years. I'd taught him to throw a baseball, helped with homework, paid for college, given him advice about careers and relationships. In return, he'd betrayed me in the most personal way possible. He stopped being my son the moment he decided to pursue my wife. Everything else is just paperwork. Zeke nodded, understanding the finality in my voice. For what it's worth, I think you handled this perfectly. Most men would have done something stupid and ended up in jail. You kept your head, documented everything, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. Truth has a way of cutting through nonsense, I agreed. People can argue with opinions, but they can't argue with timestamps and screenshots. My phone buzzed with another call from Blake. This time, I answered. What do you want? Dad, please. Can we meet somewhere and talk? Just the two of us? We have nothing to talk about. I can explain everything. It's not what you think. Blake, I have documented evidence of everything you and Mira did. Timestamps, messages, camera footage. There's nothing to explain and nothing to think about. The facts speak for themselves. But I'm your son. No, I said quietly. You were my son. Now you're just someone I used to know who made terrible choices. I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, lawyers, paperwork, the messy business of untangling a life. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about consequences, matching actions, and truth prevailing over deception. Mira and Blake had gambled that they could betray me without facing any real repercussions. They'd lost that bet, and now everyone in town knew exactly what kind of people they really were. 3 days after the email went out, I was beginning to think the worst was over. Mira had moved in with Tessa temporarily, Blake had apparently left town, and the media attention was starting to fade. I should have known better than to expect a quiet resolution. Thursday evening found me at the tavern helping Zeke with inventory when Blake walked through the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping in his truck. But there was something else in his expression that I didn't like. Desperation mixed with anger, the kind of combination that makes people do stupid things. "We need to talk," he announced, loud enough for the dozen or so patrons to hear. "No, we don't," I replied, not looking up from the clipboard I was holding. "We covered everything Sunday." "You destroyed my life." "You destroyed your life. I just documented it." Blake moved closer, his hands clenched into fists. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I can't show my face anywhere in this town. My friends won't return my calls. The startup I was working with dropped me after someone sent them your little presentation." "Consequences," I said, finally looking at him. "Amazing how they work, isn't it?" The tavern had gone quiet. Everyone was watching our exchange with the kind of fascination people reserve for car accidents and reality television. Zeke moved behind the bar, positioning himself within reach of the baseball bat he kept for emergencies. "I made a mistake," Blake continued, his voice rising. "People make mistakes. They don't deserve to have their entire lives destroyed because of one bad decision." "One bad decision?" I set down the clipboard and gave him my full attention. "Blake, you pursued a relationship with your father's wife for months. You planned secret meetings, exchanged intimate messages, and carried on behind my back while living in my house. That's not one bad decision. That's a sustained campaign of betrayal." "She came on to me." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably. Even Zeke looked surprised by Blake's willingness to throw Mira under the bus. "So you're saying you're the victim here?" "I'm saying it's complicated. You don't understand what it was like, living in that house, seeing how unhappy she was." "Stop!" My voice cut through his rambling like a blade. "Just stop talking." Blake's face flushed red. "You can't just dismiss me. I'm trying to explain." "Blake, let me explain something to you. I've been in construction for 22 years. I've worked with men who faced real problems, job injuries, family tragedies, financial disasters. You know what they don't do? They don't blame other people for their choices. This is different." "No, it's not. You saw something you wanted and you took it, regardless of who got hurt. Now you're facing consequences and you want someone else to fix it for you. That's not how the world works." Blake looked around the tavern, perhaps hoping for support from the crowd. He found none. Small-town people have strong opinions about family loyalty, and his actions had violated every unwritten rule of decent behavior. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "What can I do to fix this?" "Nothing. There's nothing you can do because there's nothing to fix. Some things, once broken, stay broken." "But I'm your son." "You keep saying that like it means something, like biology creates some kind of obligation that overrides behavior. But being my son didn't stop you from betraying me, so why should it stop me from cutting you out of my life?" Blake's desperation was palpable now. "Please, Dad. I'll do anything. I'll move away. I'll never contact Mira again. Blake." I stood up, and something in my posture made him step back. "You want to know what you can do? You can leave. Walk out that door, get in your truck, and drive away. Don't come back to this town, don't contact me, and don't ever use the word Dad again when referring to me." "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more in my life." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Blake looked like he was going to say something else, but Zeke cleared his throat meaningfully and gestured toward the baseball bat. "I think it's time for you to go, son," Zeke said quietly, "before this gets any uglier than it already is." Blake's face cycled through several emotions: anger, hurt, defiance, before settling on resignation. "Fine. But don't expect me to disappear forever. I have rights too." "Rights?" I almost laughed. "Blake, you forfeited your rights when you decided to sleep with my wife. You want to talk about rights? I have the right to choose who's part of my family, and you're not." He turned and walked toward the door, but stopped at the threshold. "You'll regret this. Someday you'll realize you threw away your only son over a woman who wasn't even worth it." "You're right about one thing," I said. "She wasn't worth it. But neither were you." Blake left without another word, and the tavern slowly returned to normal conversation. Several people came over to offer support or share their own opinions about the confrontation, but I was barely listening. I felt empty, like I'd just finished demolishing a building that had been condemned for months. Zeke appeared at my table with 2 whiskeys. That was rough. Had to be done. Think he'll stay away? Probably. Blake's never been good at facing difficult situations. He'll find somewhere else to start over and convince himself he was the real victim in all this. And Mira? What about her? Think she'll try anything similar? Some kind of last-ditch effort to save face? As if summoned by our conversation, the tavern door opened again and Mira walked in. She looked better than Blake had, professionally dressed, makeup carefully applied, hair styled. But her eyes held the same desperate quality I'd seen in her stepson. "Wonderful," Zeke muttered. "It's like they coordinated this." Mira approached our table with the kind of forced confidence that comes from practicing a speech in the mirror. "Wilder, I know you don't want to see me, but we need to discuss the practical aspects of our situation." "Lawyer?" I said without looking up. "What?" "Anything we need to discuss can go through lawyers. I don't have anything to say to you directly." "Don't be childish, we're both adults. We can handle this maturely." I looked at her then, really looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no residual affection. Just the mild irritation you might feel toward a stranger who's interrupting your evening. "Mira, you lost the right to appeal to my maturity when you decided to conduct an affair with my son in my house. Now, you get to deal with lawyers and legal proceedings like any other adversary." "Adversary?" "Wilder, we were married for 8 years. Were, past tense. Now you're just someone who used to live in my house." She pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited. "Fine, let's talk about the house, and your business assets, and the joint accounts. You can't just freeze me out of everything we built together." "Actually, I can. Funny thing about adultery, it tends to affect asset division in divorce proceedings, especially when it's documented as thoroughly as yours is." Mira's composure cracked slightly. "You can't prove anything happened. Messages and calendar appointments don't prove physical intimacy." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I'd labeled Additional Evidence. "Want to bet on that?" Her face went pale as she realized there might be more documentation than what I'd shared Sunday. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Mira, you conducted your affair in a house equipped with motion sensors, security cameras, and smart home technology. Did you really think I wouldn't be able to piece together a timeline of exactly what happened and when?" The truth was, I didn't have video evidence of anything explicit. But I didn't need to. The implications were clear enough, and Mira's guilty conscience was doing most of the work for me. "What do you want?" she asked, echoing Blake's earlier question. "I want you to sign whatever divorce papers my lawyer presents, take whatever settlement he deems appropriate, and disappear from my life completely. And if I refuse? Then we go to court, and I present every piece of evidence I've collected to a judge and jury. Your affair becomes part of the public record, permanently searchable and forever associated with your name. Your choice." Mira sat in silence for several minutes, probably calculating her options and finding them all unpalatable. Finally, she stood up and straightened her jacket. "You're not the man I married," she said. "You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. Consider this an upgrade." After she left, Zeke and I finished our drinks in comfortable silence. The tavern was nearly empty now, just a few regulars who'd seen enough small-town drama to know when a story was reaching its conclusion. "Feel better?" Zeke asked. "Feel different. Not sure if it's better or worse, but definitely different." "Think they'll both stay away now?" "Blake will. He's a coward at heart, and cowards don't stick around for extended confrontations. Mira might try one more approach through lawyers, but she'll eventually realize she has no leverage." "And then?" "Then I rebuild. New house, new routines, new relationships with people who understand the difference between loyalty and betrayal." My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Lydia. "Heard about the confrontations tonight. You handled yourself perfectly. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences. Proud of you, nephew." That message meant more to me than all the sympathy and support I'd received from strangers. Aunt Lydia had known me since I was Blake's age, had watched me make my own mistakes and learn from them. Her approval carried weight that no one else's opinion could match. The tavern's last customers filtered out around 10 p.m., leaving Zeke and me to close up. As I helped stack chairs and wipe down tables, I realized this felt like the real ending. Not the dramatic family meeting or the public revelations, but this quiet moment of ordinary work with a loyal friend. "You can stay at my place as long as you need," Zeke said as we locked up. "No rush to find your own place." "Thanks, but I think it's time to start looking. Can't rebuild a life while hiding in someone else's spare room." "Fair enough, but take your time finding the right place. No point in rushing into another mistake." Walking back to Zeke's house through the quiet streets of our small town, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. That would come later if it came at all. But the deep satisfaction of a job completed correctly. I'd identified a problem, gathered evidence, and implemented a solution. The guilty parties had been exposed, consequences had been applied, and justice had been served. It wasn't pretty or comfortable, but it was fair. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: divorce proceedings, asset division, the practical business of untangling 8 years of shared life. But tonight, for the first time since discovering Mira's betrayal, I was exactly where I needed to be. Free, clear-eyed, and ready to build something new on a foundation of truth rather than lies. Some structures can be repaired when they're damaged. Others need to be torn down completely and rebuilt from scratch. After 22 years in construction, I'd finally learned to recognize the difference.